grain offering. Chapter 3 heads into the peace offering. When his offering is a sacrifice of a peace offering. And so let's talk about what that peace offering is a little bit. As we're going to learn, we don't get it in this chapter, so it's a little bit, you have to kind of wait a little bit. God staggers his information on the peace offering a little bit. But as we get into chapter 7, we'll see that one of the distinguishing characteristics of the peace offering was that the offering or the animal was offered to God. Then what God would do is He wouldn't cause that animal to be completely consumed upon the fire. He would receive that animal, take a portion of the animal to Himself that would be completely consumed on the altar. But then He would take another portion of the animal, give it to the priest, and then a third portion of the animal and give it to the worshiper. And so everyone was eating a portion of the same animal. And so the peace offering represents a thanksgiving offering to the Lord for fellowship with God. Here's how it works in the Jewish mind. The Jewish person viewed eating with other people as very much a mystical experience. In other words, if you would go to their house and they would offer you a meal, there's the pita bread, there's the sauces, there's the meat that's on the table or whatever, and you would take your pita bread, dip it into the sauce, grab a piece of the meat and put it in your mouth. Someone else would do that. And how they would view that is that everyone, at the end of the meal, everyone had the same bread, the same sauce, the same meat inside of them. So now they are mystically, there's a mystical union that has occurred as a result of the meal. And that's why Jews would never eat with Gentiles. They did not want any union with Gentiles, mystical or otherwise. And don't fault him for that. The Gentiles, were no bargain in those days. They aren't today either. So, but that's how they viewed the meal. So, when God took this offering and He shared it with everyone else, and the implication is that He partook of it too, it represented now a union with God. It represented the fact that the offer had a relationship with God, but it was a relationship with God that was initiated by God. He shared the offering. Now, there's only one thing better than a relationship with God, and that's a relationship with God that God wants. And He wants a relationship with man. And so here is this offering, and they would all then partake of the same thing. They would recognize we are in relationship with God. We are at peace with God because of the offering. Now you may not, I don't know what your bank balance is tonight. Don't shout out. Negative. But as a simple born-again Christian, you think about how rich we are to have peace with God. To wake up in the morning and know I'm right with God. You remember when you weren't right with God? Remember how that felt? When you remember the price you paid every day for that, the weight of that, the toll that it takes on a person. And then at 10 o'clock in the morning to be going about my business, whatever my business is at 10 o'clock in the morning, and to know I'm right with God. I have peace with God. I may be running into who knows what in this fallen world, but I am not resisting God anymore. I have a personal relationship with Him. I have peace with Him. And it makes us rich. And they knew they were rich. And that's why they offered the offering to the Lord, to acknowledge that. Just tonight to realize I have peace with God. When I put my head down on the pillow, I have peace with God. If the rapture doesn't occur before I go home to be with the Lord, I will face that at peace with God. It's very, very rich things in life. And that's what the sacrifice represented. In the ancient world, when hostilities would end between one tribe and another, or one nation or another, they'd sit down and have a common meal to celebrate the end of that hostility. And so this was a celebration of relationship with God, peace with God. When His offering is a sacrifice of a peace offering, if He offers it of the herd, whether male or female, he shall offer it without blemish before the Lord. And And he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and kill it at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Again, the worshiper doing this. And Aaron's sons, then they would take care of the blood issue of the sacrifice. Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood all around the altar. And then he, that is the offerer, shall offer from the sacrifice of the peace offering an offering made by fire to the Lord. The fat that covers the entrails or the intestines, these are the portions of the peace offering that were burnt on the fire. And God received as His own, and then He dispenses the other parts of the peace offering. So God got the guts, the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys, He shall remove. Now, isn't that like a dad? He says, "Listen, I'll take the yucky stuff. I mean, you can't be eating this junk. But I see how you've given it. And I see that this is where the life of the animal comes from. So it means something different to me. But it wouldn't mean anything if I returned it back to you. So I'll take this and I'll turn the good part of the offering over to you." Very, very interesting. Again, there's mystery about why God takes some of these pieces and all. Again, I can't wait till I get to heaven and hear the Bible teaching on why He took some of these parts and didn't take other parts and all. One of the things what we might be able to guess, and there is symbolism that speaks of Christ related to all of it. But I'm just not smart enough to figure it out, and I'm not reckless enough to give you some of the theories that I've heard. But anyway, but one of the things that's interesting is he takes the liver. He wants the liver to be offered to Him. Now, in the ancient world, one of the ways that the pagan people used in order to discern the future, divining and that kind of stuff, is they would read the liver. They would cut the liver out of an animal. They would cut it open. They'd read the liver to know, okay, what are their gods telling them they're supposed to do. So God just kind of comes in and says, "Listen, you're heading into all that stuff. Might become a temptation to you. I'll just go ahead and take the liver and remove the temptation. It is no temptation to me. I'm not consulting any liver, Those of you, my mom was on a kick one time when we were kids. She was going to get liver once a week for the health benefits. Mercifully, it lasted about 3 weeks. And we found every way to get that liver in our socks and in our pants and down our shirts. Ugh. My poor mom. So, this was what he wanted. Aaron shall burn it on the altar upon the burnt sacrifice, which is on the wood that is on the fire, as an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. If his offering is a sacrifice of the peace offering to the Lord is of the flock, whether male or female, he shall offer it without blemish. Now, here God is going to give people different alternatives. So not everyone could afford a bull as a peace offering. Only probably the richer person could do that. And so the more middle class, common person, God allows for the offering of an animal of the flock, a sheep or a goat. And in order for that he would receive that equally. He didn't want anyone to be excluded from expressing this thanksgiving and all for the peace offering and praising God related to that. Now, it is fascinating in light of the burnt offering and other offerings is He does not allow for the very poor to offer as a peace offering a bird. And, as He did in other places where you could offer a pigeon or you could offer something like that, turtle doves. He didn't allow that. The reason being, not enough meat on them to share with God and the priests and the worshiper. And that was the symbolizing of the, Okay. If he offers a lamb, verse 7, of as his offering, then he shall offer it before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and kill it before the tabernacle of meeting, and Aaron's son shall sprinkle its blood all around on the altar. And then he shall offer from the sacrifice of the peace offering as an offering made by fire to the Lord its fat and the whole fat tail, which he shall remove close to the backbone. Now he's talking about a sheep, and so a sheep's a bull, different than a bull here, and so he talks about this, the fat next to the tail. They had a variety of sheep in ancient Israel, and it had a very, very fatty tail. The animal would store its fat in its tail area. It could weigh as much as 16 pounds. And God says, you go ahead and give that to me. Now, we know, what do we know? I mean, thousands of years later, we know what? It's not good to be eating all that fat like that. And so, again, God just saying, it smelled good when it burnt too, but He's just saying, listen, that's not going to be good for you. It won't bother me. I have no problem with cholesterol or anything like that. And so you roll that my way, and I'll give you kind of the leaner cuts of all of this. So they would offer the whole fat tail, which he shall remove close to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails. The 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys, he shall remove, and the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire to the Lord. If his offering is a goat, rather than a sheep, then he shall offer it before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on its head and kill it before the tabernacle of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood all around on the altar. Then he shall offer from it his offering as an offering made by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails. The 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys he shall remove. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. And so the Lord would recognize it as kind of his side of partaking in this meal. It was offered to him as food. And this shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations. In all your dwellings you shall eat neither fat nor blood. And so the prohibition against the eating of fat or blood, and we see the health reasons for not eating the fat, at least these high concentration of fatty cuts of the animals. But then later on we'll get into a little more thoroughly God's prohibition against eating any blood, and that is an animal that hadn't been properly bled or drinking of any blood in any way. And the reason is the Bible says elsewhere in the law, is the life is in the blood. The life is in the blood. And it's only been in recent history where you have the scientists and whatever the proper name is for them and all, where they study the blood and they realize the life of the body's in the blood. And so when we talk about Jesus, and even as we've sung tonight about His blood being shed for us, it's very good for us in our thinking to not just think of blood. Blood represented life. So we're singing about the fact that He gave His life for us, and because the blood represents